This is part 5 of the lecture on individualized education programs. My name is Dr. George Giuliani from Hofstra University, and we've just finished talking about the 9 required components of the IEP. And I now want to address an addendum to the required components of the IEP. The federal law IDEA adds an important new provision that the IEP team's choice of special education and related services be guided by what we call peer-reviewed research whenever possible. In other words, instructional programs and other services should be supported by strong evidence of effectiveness. This is particularly important when determining instructional programs to address reading deficits, since there is such a robust body of research showing the effectiveness of an array of reading programs. With the passage of the federal law IDEA, some new terms and concepts became a part of the IEP process. One of them is peer-reviewed research. And although the term is not formally defined in the federal law, peer-reviewed research generally refers to research that is reviewed by qualified and independent reviewers to ensure that the quality of the information meets the standards of the field before the research is published. States, school districts, and school personnel must select and use methods that research has shown to be effective to the extent that methods based on peer-reviewed research are available. Okay, what does this all mean? What do these last two slides actually mean? What it means is as follows. With the passage of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, one of the things that was said was that, look, if you're going to place a child into, say, a reading program, what evidence is there that this reading program is any good? How do we know that of the 30 different types of reading programs, the one you've picked has actually been shown to be effective to work with children with reading disabilities? In a sense, what peer-reviewed research is there out there that shows that this type of reading program is effective? And so what the federal law said is that anytime you're going to put a child into some kind of program, anytime you're going to use some type of method, we have to show that there's some kind of peer-reviewed research that supports the use. Again, with so many different possible options, we have to look at what do we know is effective? How do we know what is going to work or has been shown in the research to be effective? So anytime we have this type of situation, peer-reviewed research has to support our decision. So there won't be a section on the IEP that says peer-reviewed research. There's no section on the report that says peer-reviewed research. But what you need to understand is that the decisions that are being made regarding the peer review, regarding the programs, have to be shown to be backed up with peer-reviewed research to support it. When we talk about the time frame for the development of an IEP, an initial IEP must be developed within 30 calendar days of a determination that a child requires special education and related services. So, if on October 1st it is determined that a child is in need of special education and related services, and the parent signs off at the meeting that they agree to the child receiving special ed, an IEP has to be developed by October 31st. You've got 30 days, 30 calendar days to get an IEP developed. Educational placement must be based on an IEP. Parents are a part of the IEP team and therefore must be a part of the decision-making process. Now remember, the IEP is not written for a specific location. We don't write an IEP for a specific location. Instead, what we do is we develop the IEP, and then based on the needs of the child, based on the IEP, we then determine the educational placement for the child. Because deciding the placement of a child before IEP development is actually a procedural violation of IDEA. And again, this makes sense. Think about it. We want to first develop the IEP, figure out the needs of the child, figure out the goals of the child, figure out what it is that this child actually should be striving for. And knowing the child's abilities and knowing where the child stands, then make a determination of the educational placement for that child. And this will be discussed further when you watch the lecture on least restrictive environment. When we talk about IEP meetings, the IEP is developed at meetings involving interested parties. The school district is responsible for initiating and conducting these meetings, and the IEP team consists of many different people. And IDEA mandates that certain individuals be a part of the team. The school district has to ensure that the IEP team for each child with a disability includes very specific people. So when we write an IEP, we have to have an IEP meeting. And at this IEP meeting, we have the IEP team members. And IDEA lays out very specifically who should be on the IEP team. And these include the parents of the child, not less than one regular education teacher of the child or gen ed teacher, not less than one special education teacher of the child, or if the child's not in special education, then one special education teacher, the director of special education for the school district or in the specific school building, someone who can interpret the results for the child, someone who can interpret the instructional implications of evaluation results. Again, there'll be a lot of results being looked at. There'll be a lot of tests being looked at. Someone's got to be there who can explain what these results mean to the parents. At the discretion of the parent or of the school district, any other individuals who may have knowledge or special expertise regarding the child, including related services personnel as appropriate. So, for example, if the child has his or her psychologist, we can invite his psychologist in. If the child is under the care of a psychiatrist, if the child has a neurologist, all of these people could be a part of the IEP team meeting. Whenever appropriate, we would like to have the child with the disability to be there. Again, if the child's younger, we normally don't have the child at his or her IEP meeting, but in the same light, if the child is older, especially if we're talking about transition services, we want the child at this meeting. And then finally, any transition services participants would be there when appropriate. So if we know a child is going to be transitioning from school to post-school activities, and we have people who will be a part of that process, those people should be a part of the IEP team. So again, the IEP team is going to be composed of the parents. Parents must be a part of the IEP team. One gen ed teacher, one regular ed teacher, one special ed teacher, a director of special education, someone who can interpret the results, any other individuals who may have special expertise regarding the child, like I said, like a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a physical therapist, anybody who works with this child outside of the school. Whenever appropriate, the child with a disability, if that child can be there, we'd like to have the child there. And finally, if we're addressing transition services when appropriate, participants when appropriate. All of these members must be in attendance unless the parents and the school district agree in writing that attendance of that team member is not necessary, and when that area of curriculum and/or services is not being modified or discussed. The IEP meeting may include other individuals who have knowledge or special expertise regarding the child. You should know that the parents and school always have the right to have legal counsel at an IEP meeting if they believe a lawyer's knowledge and expertise would be helpful. So we would hope that we wouldn't have to have this be adversarial or have a lawyer at the meeting, but know that the parents do have the right to have a lawyer there if the parent would like to have one there. And if the parent has a lawyer there, then the school district can bring his or her its lawyer as well. When we talk about IEPs and transferring to a new school, if a child with a disability who had an IEP that was in effect in a previous school transfers to a new school, the new school district, in consultation with the parents, must provide a free appropriate public education to the child, including services comparable to those described in the child's IEP from the previous public agency. The U.S. Department of Education says that comparable is defined as similar or equivalent. And note, if the new school district calls into question the services and/or classification, it can conduct a new evaluation for determination of eligibility. So what that means is this: if you have a child who's at a school with a disability, he's at a school, and then that child transfers to a new school, the new school district is legally responsible to continue to provide a free, appropriate public education to that child. And it has to be comparable to the education that the child was receiving at the kid's previous school district. So when you transfer from one school to another school, you still get the free, appropriate public education that you got at the other school. And it's got to be comparable to the one that you received. Comparable, again, being defined as similar or equivalent. If the new school district where the child moved into questions the services or questions the classification, that school district can conduct a new evaluation for determination of eligibility. And that ends part 5 of the lecture on individualized education programs. You can now move on to part 6.